Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Hoops with Noops, brought to you by the fine folks at FTN. Of course, I am Alex Noops Christensen. I'm here in video every Monday and Friday, and you can read my written work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Get all my thoughts for every NBA game. And as always, make sure you sign up for all the great stuff at FTN. The Discord is fantastic. There's lots of picks in there for every sport, some great conversations, a lot of people really helping each other win. It's really great in there. And of course, you get all the excellent content, data, tools, everything that you've come to know from FTN. Just a ton of great things. The NFL model this year was fantastic, had a great season betting totals. It's so hard to find stuff like that. And check it out. It's really great. If you look at the banner at the bottom, you can find a code there to sign up and get yourself a discount. But let's get to it. Let's talk about some hoops. Happy Friday. We are at the end of the week. We've got 10 NBA games, and I was looking at the standings. We're almost halfway home. Most teams have played about 38 of their 82 games. It's about 46% of the season. And it's one of those things I have to remind myself because people often talk about the trade deadline, the All-Star game as being halfway through the season, but that really comes much earlier. And I think what that means is when you look at the standings, things are a lot more serious than maybe you would think. The Minnesota Timberwolves and Oklahoma City Thunder tied for the 1 seed in the West. Now, Denver's 1 game back. The Clippers are 2 games back, but those teams hold tiebreakers the Thunder and the Timberwolves, that is, hold tiebreakers over the Nuggets and Clippers. And really, you could see one of those two teams, which everyone expected to be in the playoff hunt, but not in contention for the 1 seed, possibly finish with the best record in the league, even the Western Conference. So some really interesting stuff there. The Warriors, they're out of the playoffs. They're not even in the play-in tournament at this point. And there's, with each passing game, there is less and less time for them to catch up and get back into the postseason. You look at the Eastern Conference, things are shaking out, I think, mostly the way people expected. Maybe the order is a little bit different. Curious to see what happens with the battle for those last 2 couple play-in spots. You've got the Toronto Raptors there. They're trying like heck to get into the postseason. They've been very good. Curious to see what happens with Pascal Siakam. They've talked about trading him. And even if they do, I think there's a chance there that they could still make the postseason. The Hawks also out of the play-in tournament, but grouped closely behind Chicago and Brooklyn. So a lot of interesting stuff there, a lot to be excited about. But let's get to tonight's games. Again, some of them very important. Curious to see how everyone reacts to where they are in the year. Again, just a few weeks before the trade deadline, rumors are starting to bubble. First up, I've got 2 games I like, and then, of course, I'll go through all the other games and not for Noops. We'll start with the Houston Rockets. They go to Detroit as 7-point favorites. The total is 227. No Cade Cunningham for the Detroit Pistons. As bad as Pistons basketball has been this season, it's even worse. Cade Cunningham is really the only player on the team who is a ball handler, can initiate offense, create for other players, and score himself. And it's one of those things where you need to have all 3 of those facets, or at least one player that does, because if you can handle the ball and initiate, but you can't score yourself, defenses will just back off, basically give you space to dribble around so they can guard everybody else. It makes things a lot more clear. Conversely, if you can score for yourself, you can handle, but you don't really initiate, you don't really create anything for anybody else. Again, now the defense only has one thing to worry about. You're going to get a lot of attention. They'll force everybody else to score. It's just a really rough spot for any team to be in. This Pistons offense is a mess. The Houston Rockets, obviously much better at home, but still a good defensive team, even without Dillon Brooks. They played a very slow pace. This is the first night of a back-to-back for them, so even more of an impetus to keep this game slow. And all of that adds up to my bet here. I'm going to take a Pistons team total under. I was able to get 109.5. Even 108.5, honestly, is fine if this number is moved by the time that you're seeing this. Again, this Pistons offense is bad. They're going to struggle to score. They're going to struggle to create. Bojan Bogdanovic is probably the best option that they have, and that is not really something you want to say about an NBA team in 2024. So should be ugly. Again, the Houston defense should be able to slow this game down, keep Detroit, at the very least, mired in a slow pace. So even if there is somehow some efficiency, I just don't think there'll even be the possessions here to get them to this number. So I'll keep things simple here, lean towards the under in the full game, lean towards the Rockets, but they could struggle to cover a big number again, trying to keep the game slow. Or have a big night themselves. This Pistons defense isn't very good. So, I worry in a blowout about this possibly going over. Anytime you do have a blowout, be careful. Overs have been fantastic this year in blowouts, in games where teams win by 12 or more points. The over is hitting, I believe, north of 60%. I'll double check some of those numbers and share them in another piece later, but beware. So again, I'm not going to go with a full game under, but team totals still sometimes do go under. And again, with the way Houston plays, I like this quite a bit. So Pistons team total under 109.5. The next game up, a game that should be exciting, but we are getting a little kind of screwed here by the schedule. The New Orleans Pelicans go to Denver. Well, most of the Pelicans. We'll talk about that in a second. The Nuggets 8.5-point favorites. The total is 228.5. This line opened closer to 4.5, 5, and has been bet out, and that is because Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Trey Murphy are all listed as questionable. This is the game before going to Dallas for a 2-game series for New Orleans. And as much as divisions aren't the most important thing in the NBA, it's not quite as big of a deal, I think, as the NFL. It is important for playoff positioning. It is important for seeding. The Pelicans have a half a game lead over Dallas and really should be focused on those 2 games against the Mavericks, getting at least one of them to maintain their division lead. It would be great to beat the Nuggets tonight, but you're in altitude. It's going to be a tough game for a lot of these guys anyway. So this is a good night to rest people. And the way this game's been bet, I think that that's something we should expect. And it's unfortunate, the league tried to work on a rest policy this offseason. It just doesn't seem to have had the teeth they were really hoping for. And, we're just kind of back to this regular season basketball where there's a lot of questions, a lot of things to worry about. What I'm not worried about is the Denver Nuggets performance in the first quarter, especially at home. They are 13-4 against the spread in the first 12 minutes. It's a huge combination of, again, the altitude. That advantage really is big early in the game. Teams have struggled to adapt to it right away. As the game goes on, their bodies gets a little more used to the thin air. And Nikola Jokic plays the first 10, 11, 12 minutes of every game. That means he gets 2 to 3 minutes. Most teams play their starters 6 to 8 minutes, bring them back in maybe for the last few minutes of the first quarter. There's then a 2 to 3 minute gap where you've got Jokic just demolishing a team second unit. And I think that's really what is driving a lot of this. Now, the Pelicans have been a great first half team, one of the best first half teams in the NBA, but not in the first quarter. They tend to be, kind of break even there, fairly mediocre ratings in the first quarter. So a lot of that success comes in the second quarter. So if you look at the rotations there's some advantages that they have. So I like this quite a bit. Okay, give me the Nuggets first quarter -2.5. I have this almost 4, so I would even play -3 if it's less than -110. Again, if you're looking at this and you've got some different numbers, but first quarter -2.5, -110, -115 is good. Again, if it's -3, say -105, or anything just below 110 is probably fine. Nuggets have been great in the first quarter. I expect them to come out, especially off a loss, play very well in this game. Like that quite a bit. Now, we do have 8 other games to get to. Just want to quickly let you know kind of what I'm thinking on these games and why I'm not betting them. And we'll start with the Sacramento Kings at my Philadelphia 76ers. Sixers are 1-point favorites. The total is 241. This line's bounced around a lot today. Sacramento's got bet. Philadelphia's been bet. Joel Embiid is out. He's not going to play. That's why this line is so close. The Sixers still have a talented roster, but have struggled to figure out how to play basketball with Embiid out. So it's not the best spot in the world to back a Philly team that has been good as a favorite and has been good at home. That said, I'm not really willing to trust a Sacramento team that's at the end of a long road trip, has a lot of fatigue built up, and the matchup really isn't great for them. I mean, if Embiid was playing tonight, I think the Sixers really could crush this Kings team. Without Embiid, they still match up pretty well. I mean, they're going to look a lot like one another, honestly. They've got fast, really explosive point guards and De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Maxey, some talented wings, and big men that can rotate and move and be real versatile. Now, Sabonis obviously is a lot different than what the Sixers have at center tonight, but it should be a great game. I do lean towards Philadelphia, again, given the rest problems for Sacramento, but everything came out close to my projections. I'll pass on this game. The Indiana Pacers visit the Atlanta Hawks, and the Hawks have done something that I didn't think any team could ever really do, and I'm pretty sure has never done. They are the worst team against the spread at home. At 3-11, you'd lose 8.3 units if you bet the Hawks every home game. They're the worst road team against the spread. At 6-15, you're down 9.5 units if you bet every Hawks game on the road. As a favorite, the Hawks are 4-14. You'd be down 10 units if you bet the Hawks every time they were a favorite. And as an underdog, also the worst. And again, in all 4, including the 5-12 as an underdog, -7.5 units. That's staggering. And as someone that is a little wary of trends, this is something that to me says the market has not evaluated this team correctly. And if you look at their rating, they have been dropping and it continues to drop. What that means is at some point it's going to get too low and there's going to be a buyback point. And it seems to have settled a little bit the past couple games. The Hawks were able to get a win and a cover the other night. They've been bet again in this matchup against Indiana. The Pacers without Halliburton, again, 5.5-point underdogs. The total's 252. Pretty close to my numbers, but I'm just going to have to wait on the Hawks games a little bit and see. This is just such a weird dynamic in a market that is generally efficient. And like I said, adjust down here. So I just don't know what to make of the Hawks. The total's 252. I think the under is probably a good look here. The Pacers without Halliburton have been a lot slower, but again, my projections came out pretty close. So I'm going to just tuck this game away, keep an eye on it, and see how Atlanta does, and continue to check what the rating is based on the closing line. So let's move on to the next game. The Golden State Warriors are 3-point underdogs in Chicago. The total is 228. Everything came pretty close to my model here. I think this is a tough spot for Golden State. They're on the road. Again, Draymond Green continues to be out, as is Chris Paul now. He's picked up an injury. He's going to be out for several weeks, possibly up to 2 months. And that forces Steph Curry back into the role of ball handler and point guard. Curry is really his best off the ball, cutting, moving, finding spots, getting three-pointers, doing all that kind of stuff. And again, Draymond usually facilitates that with passing and screening. Same with Chris Paul. Without those guys, Curry's going to be on the ball, and it really limits his ability. Again, just a really tough spot for them. At the same time, it's hard for me to trust this Bulls team as 3-point favorites. They've needed overtime the last couple games to beat teams they really should be better than. The lineup is constantly changing with Levine in, Vucevic back here. So everything is just kind of a mess in this game. I'm happy to let it go. The Portland Trailblazers played last night, did a great job of getting our team total under. I think that went under by about 25, 30 points. Go to Minnesota. The Timberwolves are 14-point favorites. The total is 221.5. I was ready to bet another Trailblazers team total under, but the market has finally moved not quite enough. Again, I still think there's value on the under. It's down to 102.5 after being 108.5 yesterday. But I'm worried about Minnesota without Rudy Gobert. Gobert is questionable, and if he's out tonight, he's really the linchpin of their defense, the best defense in the NBA, that is. Minnesota's still good on that end without him, but in a blowout game, like I said, blowouts tend to be solid for overs. I wonder if they're going to lose some of that defensive intensity late in the game, and maybe Portland finally can make a couple of just the tons of threes they've been putting up the last few games. So just a lot of reason for variance here. I'm going to let that one go. The Orlando Magic visit the Miami Heat, and this game is a mess. Franz Wagner is out. Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero are doubtful. Wendell Carter Jr. questionable. And those are the only names I felt like reading. There's about 7-8 names for each team that are questionable, doubtful, or out. It's just a mess of a game. I really don't know what to expect. Again, the Heat are at home. It's a little bit better of a schedule spot for them. I kind of lean Heat -3.5. The total's 219. I think there's a chance we might go over given some of the defensive pieces that are out, but it's just too messy. I really don't know what to make of this game, so I'll pass. The Clippers go to Memphis. The Grizzlies are 7.5-point underdogs. The total is 228.5. And I just don't know what to do with this Grizzlies team. I bet against them a couple times without John Morant, and they've won those games outright. We're able to beat the Mavericks as big underdogs. We're able to beat the Suns as underdogs. Just a really interesting team, and one that's hard for me to figure out. The Clippers beat them pretty soundly once already this year. I would think they would, but it's a road game, and everything here is pretty close to my projections anyway. So, again, I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on this, and maybe I'll learn a little bit more about Memphis, but I can't really advise a bet. This next game is fairly interesting, despite being two of the worst teams in the NBA. The Charlotte Hornets go to San Antonio. The Spurs -1.5. The total is 236. LaMelo Ball playing for the first time in about 2 months, maybe a little less than 2 months, will really change what this Hornets team looks like. I have this game under, but it's hard for me to understand what LaMelo is going to be able to do tonight, what he's going to be able to help this Hornets team from a scoring perspective. He is far and away the best offensive player. He pushes pace. Now, the Spurs have played slower since they've moved Trey Jones to point guard, but it's still a young team. If Wembanyama's out there playing well tonight, and again, it's the first night of a back-to-back for San Antonio, so I don't know how many minutes we'll see from Wembanyama. And either way, it's a young team. They might get sucked into running if LaMelo Ball can take this game and turn it into a track meet. So as much as I kind of like the under, I'm not sure what to make of a Hornets team that, again, is getting back LaMelo Ball, and a Spurs team that continues to change their lineup and starting to look more interesting despite not winning games yet. And the final game of the night, the Toronto Raptors are underdogs in Utah. The Jazz minus 2.5. The total for that game is 235.5. It should be a really fun game. The Jazz have been quietly very good now that everyone's healthy. They've won 9 of their last 11 games with several wins over title contending teams. They're pushing up towards the playoff spot. And again, it's a fun team. They don't really have a star, but they have 10, 11 guys that are average to above average NBA players. And that kind of depth in the regular season is a huge advantage. Toronto's looked great since the trade. I've been eyeing a Toronto Raptors team total over, but want to see what's going on with Pascal Siakam. He's listed as questionable. If he's in, the number might still be a little too high for me. If he's out, I expect actually the market to adjust down, and I still might play that team total over. So keep an eye on the FTN Bets Discord. Again, in that NBA Plays channel, I put everything out before I even start writing, before I start working on videos and stuff, so you can get everything right away. Generally, the best of the number there. And I'm always floating around in the chat to ask some questions. So again, make sure you sign up. And if you haven't, take a look at that banner down below. There is a code for you to sign up. Of course, our plays for tonight in the Houston Rockets and Pistons game, I will take the Pistons team total under 109.5. Again, any number 108.5 or higher looks like a good bet. In the New Orleans Pelicans Denver Nuggets game, give me the Nuggets in the first quarter minus 2.5. Again, we play that 2.5 up to minus 15. If you look at -3, hopefully it's at a little better than minus 110. Really like the Nuggets here in the first 12 minutes of that game. It should be great for them. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Again, love all the support you guys give me. You can find me on Twitter at _Noops. My DMs are always open. Of course, leave a comment down below. Would love to hear what you think of the show. If there's anything I could be doing better or any other information you'd like from this spot, put it down there in the comments below. Appreciate a thumbs up, and make sure, again, you subscribe to this channel. Lots of great content coming through here. This is a great way to get little bits and pieces of all that great FTN product for free, but it's always best to sign up. We'd really appreciate it. Again, thanks for watching. Best of luck. I'll see you soon. Until then.